Hi, my name is Gordy Hogue, and this is Community Connection. Each of us have stories that help us understand each other and help to bring our community closer together. I have been very fortunate to have met many interesting people who've had a positive, profound impact on our community and far beyond. People who've had incredible life experiences and fascinating stories. Community Connections is about these people and about their stories. I'm sure you'll enjoy meeting these amazing people as much as I have. Thank you. Please enjoy. Welcome to Community Connections. Today's guest is a very personable, engaging man, a man who has been a very positive, active participant in our community. Actually, he's a man who helps us plan each of our days as well. He is our weatherman. Welcome, Mark Madryga. Welcome to Community Connections.
Thank you for having me. Yes, and I like it when you say I'm your weatherman. I've been your weatherman for over a quarter of a century, actually. So, and it's good to carry on as that. Nice to be here.
And you've been a weatherman much longer than that. I understand you had an interesting start to your belief in what you wanted to do and be in this world.
Well, definitely. And I think it was about age 9, which is, well, a long time ago, that I won't say how long. No, it's quite a while back, 1972. I remember that year because we had tremendous flooding in the Kamloops area where I grew up. And I was really into mathematics and numbers, basically. And I followed the river levels, and I was intrigued by weather and hydrology and rising rivers. And we had floods all over the place in British Columbia in the year 1972, especially hard hit was Kamloops. So I would ride my bike down near the river and try to measure those levels and kind of graph them at home when I got home. And it was that year onward that I really developed an interest in weather. So from that point, and again, I was 9, 10, 11 over the following few years of age, just a kid in elementary school, and had a portable tape recorder, and I would record my own weather little segments, giving the forecast and what's going on. Of course, my voice hadn't changed then, so it was pretty neat. I still have I still have all those tapes in my garage. There are about 150 of those little cassette tapes. So I'd phone the weather office on a recording in Kamloops, and there'd be this 1-minute recording. They'd update every hour, and I'd put my tape recorder to the phone and tape that, and I'd listen to the radio station, and the local weatherman would be on there as well, and I'd tape all those segments, and I was just fascinated by it. So it all started, when I was about 9 years old, back in the early 70s, and I must say that it did carry on from there too, which is good. That's why I'm here as a meteorologist.
So was there anything that you saw as a precursor to that, or something that got you intrigued and interested in it? You were born in Kamloops and grew
Born
up
in
in there.
Kamloops. Yeah, the weather in Kamloops, they have the seasons there more than we do here on the coast, where they have thunderstorms in the summertime, extreme heat, and snowy events, maybe a little more dominant there in the winter. So the weather was more changeable and quite interesting. So I suppose that was part of it. But it's hard to say why weather just became fascinating to me. I just developed a real interest as a kid, and it carried on from there. I must say, well, I really enjoy it now. I mean, it's my profession, and I get very excited about the weather when I do it on the radio and the television, when it's interesting, when the weather is changing or there's a big rain event or snow event, etc. But I remember as a kid, I was just so excited. I'd spend a lot of time inside. I drove my mom crazy sometimes because she wanted me to go out and play hockey on the street, which I did, or throw football around with the guys, and I did all that too. But I'd sometimes run inside and get the latest weather report when it was in the middle of a hockey game out of the road or something. But anyways, totally excited about the weather as a kid, and it carried on for years.
So I understand that Kamloops also is sort of the center in terms of from people who are flying their personal planes or helicopters, that they get all of the weather out of Kamloops. Well, how did Kamloops become the center for weather?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
well, that kind of happened a little after I was gone from Kamloops and moved on to university in my career. But yeah, it's a hub for aviation in there, and that makes sense. It's right in the center of the south central interior, and it's definitely a focal point or a focus of aviation, as you say. Um, but yeah, I know they had a full weather office when I grew up there, which did aviation reporting and the pilot briefings. There's still some of that, or the aviation is still big today. The actual weather office, where I dreamed of working when I was a 9, 10, and 11-year-old, I thought, okay, I live in North Kamloops, about 3 miles from the airport. I think I just continue on and live here my entire life and then work at the Kamloops weather office. It didn't work out that way. I mean, it worked even probably better because I got to move around a lot and become a meteorologist. But yeah, Kamloops was and still is definitely a hub for a lot of things, including weather. You bet.
So when you were hired, I understand, what was it, 6 people were hired across Canada?
Well, yeah, I forget the exact number. I think it was more in the 20s, but just a few from Vancouver. So I went through to Caribou College in Kamloops right after grade 12 and studied geography and sciences and meteorology, and then moved to UBC in the fall of '84 and finished my degree in physical geography with a focus on meteorology back in 1986. And then in 1987, yeah, Environment Canada in Toronto, they do a training course in Toronto for meteorologists that work across the country. It's an 8-month, very intense course. I applied in the spring of '87, and they had their recruiters go around the country and hire meteorologists from the different universities. Meteorologists, prospective meteorologists for their training course. And I was one of, yeah, it might have been 5 or 6 from UBC in
Uh-huh.
those days. So we all collected in Toronto in the fall of '87, a classroom full of potential meteorologists, and we took it from there. And thankfully, I did graduate in the spring of '88. Posted back to Vancouver at the Pacific Weather Center as a meteorologist, entry level, and took it from there. So that's some 30 something years ago.
Yeah. And living in the South Surrey White Rock area, is there
Mhm.
something unique about the weather and along the coast and in this community?
There is definitely. Well, as of now, there are at least 3 or 4 current or retired weather forecasters that have done weather on TV or radio, and probably even more that have worked at Environment Canada, living in the South Surrey White Rock area. Why? Well, there's more sunshine in our area. The precipitation is much less versus even the city of Vancouver or certainly the North Shore and the Fraser Valley. So we are in a much drier part, as you know, of British Columbia, in White Rock, South Surrey, and brighter too. You just have to look to the north to see the clouds plugging up over the North Shore Mountains. And really, the reason for that is especially two reasons, but they're connected. Mountains. We have the North Shore Mountains to the north where the clouds form more and they just stick around the North Shore Mountains, and converging in the Fraser Valley. The valley becomes narrower in the eastern Fraser Valley. The clouds kind of stick in there. So they stay more to the north and east of White Rock, South Surrey, typically. Plus, the Olympic Mountains to the south, when that airflow, which is dominant, comes over those Olympic Mountains, it subsides, and we get this nice blue sky near and south of South Surrey White Rock that's dominant too. So, mountains to the north, the mountains to the south help us, and we're in the middle. And yeah, often it's sunnier here than it is anywhere in the lower mainland.
And in many ways unique in Canada, I assume, as well, in terms of weather.
Yeah, well, certainly one of the driest spots in Canada, along with, well, they like to brag in Tawasin as well.
Mhm.
They like to brag in on the Gulf Islands, the San Juan Islands to the south of us, very dry in there and mostly bright. But certainly, we right here in White Rock, South Surrey, a lot drier and sunnier than other spots. You have to go, or you only have to go a few miles to the east of us, where there's a little bit more elevation to the east as you go through, well, into Langley and certainly the eastern Fraser Valley, some of those rolling hills where the precipitation is much more. So, yeah, we're really in a nice central area here, not just close to the beach, but even in all of South Surrey, a lot drier.
I remember when I was in Victoria that we had a unique something happened in the South Surrey White Rock area where I don't know what it was, but people were describing for me that they were driving, and it was just, they couldn't see the rain was coming down, and then the next 2 feet and it was totally dry. And what was going on at that point that created that flood in our on Marine Drive?
Yeah, that was one I'll never forget. I was with my young son. I think he was 2.5 years, and I was at home. I was on a day off from Environment Canada that day, and it was right around lunchtime or so, or even through the morning up to lunchtime. And the rain was torrential. I was a, I guess a couple kilometers at my home just north of the beach. So I wasn't right along White Rock Beach. But the cell that came over, a cell meaning a major cumulonimbus cloud and heavy, heavy rain and hail, it centered right over the peninsula here. Now, up around 24th and north of that area, the sun was actually out. So it was right on the edge, but it was right over mostly White Rock. Uh, and there were two of them, I believe, that, or maybe a merging of two of these massive cells. Absolute extreme downpours and the hail, and there was the serious flooding, and you can see that on YouTube. I looked at it yesterday to remind myself, back on June 8th of 1999. So very localized. Now that was one day where other places were nice and dry and sunny, and in White Rock it was the heaviest rain probably anywhere in the world at that time, that was just pounding down. So a really freak storm. And I'll never forget, I was calling into Environment Canada, and they didn't have the high level Doppler radar like they do now. So they couldn't really see the intensity of the storm over White Rock. So I was giving them reports in their office, of course, in Vancouver. And they almost didn't believe me that it was coming down so hard. I just had to say, look, this is crazy. Uh, and so they hung up the phone. Okay, thanks, Mark. And then I got a call a few minutes later, and they said, Mark, can you give me a little more information? The mayor has just declared a state of emergency in White Rock. What's going on? So yeah, it's something I'll never forget, but a freak storm, and of course that terrible damage in that area.
Yeah, it was. And White Rock is now, we're seeing, as you give your weather reports to us, that White Rock is part of it. How did White Rock get into that unique position of getting its name posted each night?
Well, I was with Environment Canada then, when the White Rock Station was put in, and I've heard some of the history, but basically it was originally going to go to another part of Surrey, that particular station that Environment Canada was installing, but instead it ended up right in White Rock, at the City Works Yard, and it's a little bit off the water. It's a few blocks off the water, but it's very representative of White Rock overall. It's in a terrific location, and its call letters are CWWK, and it's easy for me to plot it on my maps here at Global. I got that on several years ago. There are other stations in the Lower Mainland, of course, that we plot on our maps that show the current temperatures and weather information, but White Rock is right on there. And it's quite a good station because you always, it shows the wind and the temperature, relative humidity. It's all the regular data, but you can always tell when the wind or the flow is coming off the water, because it may be 23 degrees or so, and all of a sudden it's 19, and you know that sea breeze is kicked in and the temperature is falling. But it could be a hot spot too. If the wind is off the land, gently flowing in from the Fraser Valley in the middle of summer, that temperature can soar to over 30 degrees. But yeah, it's nice to have that official Environment Canada White Rock Station just right here where we
Correct.
are, and only a few blocks from my
Absolutely.
house.
Yeah. So there have been lots of talk about climate change in the world and global warming and the impact that's having. What can you tell us about that in terms of your expertise and knowledge in that area, and the direction that our world is headed based on that?
Well, okay. I won't say I'm a climate change expert. There are those that are researching that. That's their main job, and reading about it and just experiencing it over my years as a meteorologist, I can tell you that there's definitely the climate change. Now, mostly warming of the globe, as we know, especially in the oceans too, but especially in the Arctic areas over the land. And that is obviously a serious issue, and we know all about it. And the trend to a warmer globe is definitely happening now. Focusing on BC, no doubt about it, we are having warmer summers now. We had some very warm decades in past decades, this past century. Um, uh, then perhaps a little bit of cooling in some of the later decades, but the trend overall, we do get some cooler years as well, but the trend overall is towards a warmer British Columbia winter and summer. There's no doubt about that. Um, so I'm a believer in climate change. I just am not an alarmist all the time when we may get, even though heat waves with climate change are going to be more common, maybe cold spells will be more common, more extremes in weather, but I'm not an alarmist every time we have, 4 or 5 hot days and then maybe breaking records 3 of those days for heat, because those things are normal to have some extremes. But we kind of hear every time, for instance, when I'm in the media doing the weather here, the people will say, well, we set a record high 3 days in a row. It's climate change. It's global warming. Well, okay, there is that going on, but just slow down, slow down. These things have always happened. We've always had record temperatures and, heavy snows and high wind events in past. These things have always happened. So each and every event I hear about climate change. That's weather. Weather is day to day, week to week. Climate change is years and centuries, really. So while I don't get, as I say, I'm not an alarmist with each weather event, I do have a concern about climate change. So for for the future, it's something that we obviously have to try to figure out, and we're trying to do that in some countries, not all countries, but yeah, it's a huge issue without a doubt.
So there's a lot of technology that's come along in the past number of decades, and I think that weather prediction or weather people who predicted the weather back, they used to print a book with the almanac that told you what the weather is going to be for the whole every month.
Yeah.
And now with technology and satellite, and what are the new technologies that have made a difference in that? And what do you see about the future in terms of predicting?
Well, I see weather forecasts becoming even more accurate. Now, you and I have had some fun times at different events that we do over the years, where you dig at me a little bit, in fact, quite a bit at sometimes, about the accuracy of weather forecasts. And I'm my skin is pretty thick, and we have to have thick skin in this business as we forecast the weather, because we're going to be wrong sometimes. And as you say, we're wrong quite commonly. But the accuracy of weather forecasting will continue to improve as we get higher resolution computer charts, and the computer power increases, as it has so much in the past decade even, and it will continue to do so. So our computer charts and our ways of forecasting will continue to evolve, and will hopefully be more accurate. Doppler radar has been such a big uh, form of technology that has come along in the last couple of decades, and we use that every day on our television broadcasts and at Environment Canada, and forecasting tornadoes and severe thunderstorms. So radar's improved so much, satellite imagery has improved so much, computer charts, it's all really taken off over the past 10, 15 years since I started in this business, and it will continue to. In the old days, of course, they had the weather ship. They had very primitive satellite imagery, weather charts. Even when I started in the late 80s, it was it was just kind of coming along. But yeah, I look for those forecasts to really improve over time. You bet.
Do you have a favorite season?
Spring and fall, I think. I'm not crazy about the middle of summer. It sometimes gets too hot and too dry for me. This summer, of course, it's been a bit different, but I like the coolness going into September, mid-September, October, where the weather is still decent. I'm not crazy about November, December weather, or January, February, but coming into spring, I enjoy spring too. So kind of the winter, not so much. This middle of summer, nah, it's not so much.
And you drive into Burnaby most days?
I do. Yep. Yeah. I'm into Burnaby, and it's a fair drive. It's a good 30 to 45-minute drive, but it shows you how much I love South Surrey White Rock. I've lived in the area since 1998, and been commuting pretty much to Burnaby every weekday since, which is well over 20 years. So the time of day I go in, at least in the past 15 years, is 3:30 in the 3:30 in the morning. Hardly a car on the road, so it's not that I'm caught in rush hour traffic, and I'm done at noon most days. So it's kind of a 4 to 12 shift, 4 a.m. to noon. So I go in and leave at a good time. If I were 9 to 5, I'd probably think about this differently as far as commuting to Burnaby. But yeah, it's a daily routine.
And you've been active in our community with the hospital gala and sources, many, many community events that you participate in. How do you find balance in your life? How do you get that kind of balance that keeps you grounded and connecting?
You know, it's tough. Now, we all at Global TV, we're all dedicated to doing events and helping out in the community with different charity events. And I've been lucky because I do my best to be either assigned some fun charity events to help the community, or just do them on my own here in our South Surrey White Rock area. That way. When I'm done my work day, I'm close to the events, and I commute to them and be home in time to go to work early the next morning. So it ties in nicely as long as I mostly stay in our community. And it's tough sometimes if there are a number of events in a short period. It's tough to juggle, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I really, really love these things that go on in our community, and I try to do as many as possible. I must admit I can't do all of them that people ask, and none of us really can. Otherwise, we'd really have to taper them off. So I do try to do as many as I can. And you mentioned PCHAR's hospital galas and the hospice and the local food bank and the Red Surge for the community police in South Surrey White Rock. Those are ones that I've done many years, and just love helping the community as much as I can. It gives me a real thrill, and to see people that are helped by the money we raise in the different events.
Do you have any heroes or role models that you look up to or have looked up to from a younger age to at this point in time?
Uh, well, I mean, I think just on a fun note more, I look up to you as an example, and I look up to those that have and continue to represent us in our cities and communities that lead us for sure. But in a fun way, I was how about this? I was a big hockey fan. I was a big Guy Lafleur fan.
Yeah.
I was a big Jimmy Connors fan. I loved to play tennis as a kid, and I still try to get out. I mean, I love some of the Wayne Gretzky. I mean, these role model athletes that were such a big part of my growing up. But no, community leaders for sure, and the work that they do, and it's tireless. You talk about me helping out a little bit in the community as much as I can, and the amount I do is minuscule compared to such as what you've done in your time and continue to do, and other community leaders. So generally, those are my role models. You bet.
If you go on a vacation, is there some part of the world that you go to, or some place that you'd like to go to and haven't visited yet?
Good question. Well, typically let's see. Well, I spent a lot of time in Kamloops, but I've been there many, many times. I'd like to do a little more in Europe, maybe Italy, or I've been to Hong Kong. I haven't been to Japan. Japan would be another possibility. I love the United States. I haven't been to New York. I'd love to try New York sometime, or Montreal. I haven't been to Montreal. So I of course went to school in Toronto, but I never did get to Montreal. So maybe some of those, yeah, and other parts of Canada, a little more traveling within the country. You bet.
Do you get a chance to do any reading? Do you have a favorite author or any books that have influenced you or been important to you?
Let's see. Okay, this is a part you're going to have to edit out. Probably not. Let's leave it there.
How about
Not much time to read.
how about musicians or songs or favorite entertainers?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay.
Ask me that again.
Okay. Who are your favorite entertainers, the people you've contacted or people that you listen to or like to listen to, or movie stars or musicians or
If
bands?
you've, yeah, if you've ever seen me on a segment during the weather on TV, I sometimes stray off and talk about Canadian musicians and Canadian music. I just love the Canadian talent, and growing up in the 70s and 80s. I'm a big April Wine fan, lover boy, a trooper who live in our area too.
Ray
They
McGuire, yeah.
absolutely love them. Backman Turner Overdrive. It just goes on and on. Stampeders. How about the Stampeders
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
70s? I know it's going back. I must admit I'm not up too much in the music of today. I try to get a little bit and try to stay up with some, but I'm more nostalgic and lost in the 70s and 80s, especially with Canadian groups and bands. So when I flip on my radio, sometimes I head over to a channel that plays all 70s and 80s. That's my thing. If I'm driving by you and you hear music on in my car, it's probably from about 30 years ago.
Perfect. If you had the power to make one change in our society or in our world, if you could magically wave a wand and make that,
Oh.
what do you think would be the most important thing from your perspective that you could change or impact?
Well, what I think about all the time, and sure globally, but even in our own community, in our own province here, just homelessness, poverty. I wish we could. You drive, especially with youth. You drive around, and in some areas of the Lower Mainland, you'll see people on the streets. People on the streets that are, especially when it's cold and they're hungry, and homelessness. I wish we could just totally eliminate homelessness and poverty, and that's why, for instance, food banks are so important, for example. But just get people off the streets, and there's must be some way to do that. So that's one thing that I'm just passionate about, and that's really bothers me. So sure, globally for that, but let's start in our own communities.
Well, it's been a delight to have you here for Community Connections, and
Thank you.
you made reference to me picking on you once, and maybe once or twice. I think I introduced you as you're such a good weather person that you can't even tell us what the weather was like yesterday, let alone tomorrow. I think that was one of my, and I think I remember once we were in a dunk tank together, and I think we
Yes.
separated shoulder, and I said, well, why don't we both get into it so we don't have to. You said, no, my shoulder. And I said, oh, no, I won't hit your shoulder. And I think I hit your shoulder when we went down and injured you at that point. And
If I recall, you deliberately landed on me, but not right on the shoulder. You kind of missed the shoulder, but you caught me anyway. But I'll never forget that. I still see people in the street. They say, "I remember the time you and Gordon Hogue were in that dunk tank together." So that was a famous time many years ago. But yeah, that shoulder. Just to tell you, that's that right shoulder that still clicks. And I was in a tobogganing accident back in 2000 doing the weather on BCTV in those days, now global, and I took a big jump and I landed right on it on the new news on the TV. So I'll never forget that, and it still hasn't properly healed, especially since you landed on it.
oh, thank you. Well, thank you, Mark, for all you do in our community, all the things you do for our province. You've been a great community person, a great provincial citizen and national citizen, somebody we're very proud of. Thank you for your many contributions to our community. It's a delight to know you and a delight to see you and have you spend some time on Community Connections. Thank you for joining us today on Community Connections. Please tune in to our next show as more amazing people share their wonderful stories. If you haven't already, please click on the red subscribe button below, right down there, and view our updates. Feel free to leave any thoughts or comments that you may have. We're always trying to do a better job of connecting this wonderful community. Thanks again for joining, and until next time, keep connecting. Thank you.